As the years pass and the body undergoes its natural transitions, one of the most quietly distressing yet rarely discussed changes men over 60 experience is the gradual disappearance of morning erections. That once automatic, almost reassuring part of waking up that seems so natural and regular during younger years now fades or vanishes altogether, leaving many men puzzled, concerned, and often silently questioning their masculinity, their vitality, and whether this shift is a sign of deeper issues beneath the surface. And the truth is, the absence of morning erections isn't just about sex. It's about what that physiological response represents: hormonal health, blood flow, neurological integrity, emotional well-being, and even psychological confidence. Because for decades, waking up with a firm erection was often viewed as a quiet affirmation that everything inside was functioning as it should. A kind of internal checkmark signaling that the heart was pumping well, the nervous system was responsive, testosterone levels were balanced, and the mind-body connection was intact. And so when these morning signals begin to fade, many older men find themselves not only physically changed but emotionally shaken, wondering if they've crossed an invisible threshold where their body has begun shutting down its signals of virility. And that can be a tough pill to swallow, especially in a world that links male self-worth so closely to physical performance and sexual readiness. But the truth is far more nuanced, and it starts with understanding what causes these morning erections in the first place, because they're not random and they're not purely about arousal. They're rooted in a sophisticated interplay between the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, hormonal fluctuations during the sleep cycle, and the delicate orchestration of blood vessel relaxation, neural sensitivity, and testosterone-driven responsiveness, all of which tend to peak during the rapid eye movement, or REM, phase of sleep. And during this time, the brain becomes highly active while the body remains mostly paralyzed, yet certain autonomic functions like respiration, circulation, and yes, erectile tissue sensitivity continue operating with remarkable precision. And it's during these REM phases that men naturally experience nocturnal penile tumescence, which is the clinical term for nighttime and morning erections, often occurring 3 to 5 times per night without conscious arousal, and serving not just as a biological reflex, but as a mechanism for oxygenating the penile tissues, maintaining elasticity of the erectile chambers, and preserving long-term functionality. So when these erections stop occurring regularly or disappear completely, it's not merely a loss of sensation. It can be a red flag pointing toward underlying changes in vascular health, hormonal decline, or disruptions in the quality or depth of sleep. And for many men over 60, the first and most significant contributing factor is the natural drop in testosterone levels, which can begin declining subtly in the late 30s or 40s, but often dips more sharply around age 60 and beyond. And this decline, known as andropause or male menopause, affects not only libido and energy levels, but also the frequency and quality of spontaneous erections. And while some men maintain strong testosterone well into later life, for many others, the cumulative effects of stress, poor sleep, weight gain, metabolic disorders like diabetes or insulin resistance, and even certain medications compound to accelerate hormonal imbalances. And as testosterone falls, so does the signaling strength to the penile tissues during REM cycles, making morning erections weaker, shorter lasting, or altogether absent. And then there's the issue of blood flow, because erectile function is fundamentally a vascular process, meaning that anything that compromises blood vessel health, like high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, elevated cholesterol, or even chronic inflammation, can interfere with the smooth, pressurized flow of blood into the corpora cavernosa, the twin chambers in the penis responsible for rigidity. And since cardiovascular health and erectile health are so deeply connected, a missing morning erection could actually be one of the earliest indicators of narrowing arteries or early-stage heart disease. And yet this crucial sign often goes ignored or misunderstood, with men assuming it's just age, just fatigue, or just lack of desire, when in reality it may be the body's way of gently whispering that attention is needed, that lifestyle changes are overdue, and that restoring not just erections but overall vitality is still very possible if the underlying systems are supported. And then comes the factor of sleep itself. Because REM cycles typically occur in longer and more intense durations during the latter part of the night, meaning that anything disrupting deep sleep, whether it's frequent nighttime urination, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, or simply inconsistent bedtime routines, can shorten or eliminate the crucial windows in which nocturnal erections occur. And this means that even men with relatively good testosterone levels and vascular health may still find themselves waking up soft simply because their sleep is fragmented or shallow. And, ironically, this very issue creates a feedback loop because poor sleep lowers testosterone further, which then weakens the likelihood of REM-related erections, which then increases stress and reduces confidence, which in turn makes quality sleep even harder to achieve, and the cycle continues. But perhaps one of the least discussed yet most psychologically impactful contributors to this change is emotional disconnect. Because for many men over 60, the transitions of retirement, aging, physical limitations, grief, or shifts in relationship dynamics lead to subtle or pronounced feelings of emotional dullness, isolation, or loss of purpose. And these feelings, while not always consciously tied to sexual function, deeply influence the neurochemical state of the body and can diminish the spontaneous responsiveness that once felt automatic. And so the absence of a morning erection becomes more than a physical event. It becomes a quiet mirror reflecting deeper layers of disconnection, both from one's body and from the sense of intimate aliveness that so many men crave but rarely voice out loud. And so the key to understanding why morning erections fade is not to panic or assume that your best years are behind you, but rather to see this change as an invitation, a prompt to explore deeper, to ask more meaningful questions, to become curious about your health again, to recognize that while aging is inevitable, decline is often optional, and that there's an entire spectrum of tools, insights, habits, and healing modalities that can restore not only physical responsiveness, but the deeper confidence and self-trust that makes a man feel truly alive in his skin. Because the absence of morning wood doesn't mean the end of your virility. It means it's time to pay attention. And so when a man over 60 wakes up in the morning and notices the absence of what once felt like a routine bodily response, the conversation that needs to happen isn't just about sexual performance, but about a deeper self-check, a moment of pause to consider the intricate balance of hormones, circulation, nerve integrity, and emotional well-being that all contribute to the vitality of not only the reproductive system, but the whole body. Because what's often misunderstood is that the penis is like a dashboard light. When something's off in the engine room, it's often the first place to signal a disturbance. And just as you wouldn't ignore a warning light in your car, you shouldn't ignore the silent disappearance of morning erections. Not because it means something terrible has happened, but because it offers a rare opportunity to listen to your body before more serious problems arise. And what's remarkable is that the human body has an extraordinary capacity for regeneration and healing, even well into the 7th and 8th decades of life. Meaning that if the underlying causes are identified and addressed, many men can absolutely restore not only their morning erections, but their entire sense of vitality, presence, and masculine confidence. And the first step in this restoration begins with looking at your hormonal health, specifically testosterone, which, while it naturally declines with age, doesn't have to fall off a cliff, and many men are unaware that's certain. Lifestyle factors such as consistent strength training, reducing processed food intake, managing stress, and getting sufficient deep sleep can naturally increase testosterone production. And when testosterone begins to rise again, many men notice not only a return of libido, but also a sharper mind, better sleep, more energy, and yes, stronger and more regular morning erections. And for those whose testosterone levels are severely diminished, it's important to get proper blood work. Not just total testosterone, but also free testosterone, estradiol, sex hormone, binding globulin, SHBG, and DHA to truly understand the hormonal landscape, because sometimes it's not that the body isn't producing enough testosterone, but that it's being bound and rendered inactive by elevated SHBG levels, or being converted too quickly to estrogen due to poor liver function or high body fat. And once these imbalances are detected, targeted changes such as adding zinc, vitamin D, magnesium, boron, or even carefully guided testosterone replacement therapy when appropriate can bring about incredible improvements in not just sexual function, but overall mood and strength. And then there's the matter of circulation, because as we discussed earlier, erections are fundamentally about blood flow. And if your arteries are narrowed or inflamed, blood simply can't fill the erectile tissues the way it used to. So you must ask yourself, are you moving enough during the day? Are you eating in a way that promotes vascular flexibility and reduces inflammation? Are you getting omega-3 fats, antioxidants, nitric oxide boosters like beetroot, spinach, or watermelon? Are you drinking enough water and avoiding high sugar, high sodium foods that constrict blood vessels? Because all of these factors play a role in keeping the endothelium, the inner lining of your blood vessels, healthy and elastic. And that directly affects whether blood can rush into the penis during REM sleep and create a firm morning erection. And another critical factor to explore is sleep quality itself, because many older men assume they're getting enough rest just because they lie in bed for 7 or 8 hours. But the truth is, without reaching sufficient REM sleep, the brain doesn't send the necessary signals to trigger nocturnal erections. And REM is often blocked by things like caffeine too late in the day, alcohol consumption, sleep apnea, or even ambient light and temperature. And when REM is limited or fragmented, testosterone secretion is disrupted as well, compounding the problem. So consider your sleep hygiene. Are you going to bed at a consistent hour? Is your room dark and cool? Are you breathing freely through your nose at night, or struggling with snoring and shallow breathing? Because all of this ties back to whether your body is allowed to enter the restorative phases necessary for spontaneous erections to occur. And there's a simple at-home test that urologists sometimes recommend to assess whether the issue is physical or psychological. It's called the stamp test, where you place a strip of connected postage stamps around the base of your penis before bed. And if you wake up to find the stamps broken or separated, it means you had a nocturnal erection during the night and the physical systems are still functioning. But if the stamps remain intact for several nights in a row, it may suggest that physical causes like poor circulation or hormonal issues are contributing to the absence of morning wood. And that's valuable information that can help guide your next steps. And speaking of next steps, don't overlook the role of mental and emotional health in all of this, because chronic stress raises cortisol, and elevated cortisol suppresses testosterone and dulls arousal. And men who are living under constant pressure, worry, or unresolved grief often report a flattening of libido and a gradual fading of spontaneous erections, not because their bodies are broken, but because the nervous system has shifted into survival mode, prioritizing stress responses over reproductive signals. And if that's the case, then even practices like mindfulness, breath work, journaling, or talking with a trusted friend or counselor can make a surprising difference in reconnecting with your body's natural rhythms. And we haven't even mentioned medications yet, because many common prescriptions for blood pressure, depression, anxiety, or even enlarged prostate can interfere with the neurological and vascular responses necessary for strong erections. And yet most men never connect the dots between their daily pill regimen and their diminishing morning function. So always review your medications with a healthcare provider to determine if any are affecting your performance and whether there are alternatives with fewer sexual side effects. And finally, there's a psychological and emotional element that's so often overlooked: self-image. Because how you feel about yourself as a man, your beliefs about aging, your relationship with your own body, and your level of emotional intimacy with a partner, or even with yourself, all influence your arousal patterns and bodily responsiveness. And some men over 60 begin to internalize cultural myths that equate aging with a loss of desirability, and they unconsciously withdraw from their own sexual identity, leading not only to fewer fantasies or less arousal, but to an actual biological reduction in the frequency of erections, including morning ones. And this is why reclaiming a positive, empowered mindset around your own sexuality is one of the most important and overlooked steps you can take to reawaken this part of your life. And once a man truly understands the deeply interconnected web of influences that shape his ability to wake up with a morning erection, from hormone production to vascular health, sleep depth to psychological safety, he begins to realize that what's happening isn't a personal failure or a shameful sign of decline, but rather a natural signal from the body asking for attention, support, and sometimes healing. Because the truth is that men over 60 are not broken or past their prime, but often just underinformed. And when the right knowledge meets practical action, things can begin to shift in a surprisingly powerful way. And one of the most underestimated factors in restoring these automatic erections is daily physical movement, because the body is designed to circulate blood through muscle activity. And when a man becomes too sedentary, sitting for hours, lacking leg and pelvic engagement, avoiding strength training, or even basic walking, his circulation to the lower body suffers. And this includes blood flow to the penis. And what's especially important to understand is that the penile arteries are smaller and more sensitive than the coronary arteries, meaning they show signs of dysfunction earlier. And many urologists now believe that erectile issues, particularly the absence of spontaneous morning wood, can be one of the earliest signs of cardiovascular disease, sometimes showing up years before a man experiences a heart attack or stroke. So if you're not waking up with erections like you used to, it might be time not just to think about sex, but to think about your heart, your blood pressure, your insulin sensitivity, and your systemic inflammation levels, because these are all interwoven. And when one begins to falter, the others are affected. And addressing this doesn't always mean invasive medical treatment. Sometimes it means small, consistent lifestyle adjustments like eating more foods that reduce inflammation, such as berries, leafy greens, fatty fish, and olive oil, while avoiding excess sugar, processed meats, and refined grains that harden arteries and spike insulin. And at the same time, incorporating daily movement like walking, bodyweight squats, or light resistance training to pump oxygen-rich blood through your body and activate the pelvic floor, which is a powerful yet neglected muscle group that plays a central role in erectile function. And the stronger your pelvic floor, the more control and power you can regain over your erections. And this is where Kegel exercises come into play, not just for women, but for men too, because doing daily contractions of the pubicoccygis muscles can greatly enhance the intensity and reliability of both nocturnal and voluntary erections, especially when done with intention and breath control. And while all of this is happening on the physical level, what's also unfolding on the mental level is a transformation of self-perception, because so many older men have unconsciously internalized cultural messages that aging means becoming invisible, undesired, or irrelevant, and that emotional narrative quietly erodes their confidence and sexual energy, which then feeds back into the nervous system, increasing stress hormones, reducing testosterone, and shrinking desire. So breaking this cycle starts with reclaiming a mindset of value, purpose, and sexual sovereignty regardless of age. And this isn't about becoming who you were at 25. It's about becoming fully alive as the man you are. Now, with all the wisdom, experience, and depth you've earned, and part of that journey involves reestablishing healthy relationships, whether it's reigniting closeness with a partner, exploring gentle and mindful self-touch, or simply allowing yourself to feel desire again without guilt or shame. And because men are often raised to suppress emotion, especially around vulnerability or intimacy, it's common for these deeper needs to remain hidden, even from themselves, and yet emotional. Fulfillment and physical connection go hand in hand, and the loss of morning erections can often signal not just physical disruption, but a subconscious withdrawal from the sensual world, a gradual numbing that begins in the psyche and manifests in the body. And reversing this trend involves reawakening that part of yourself that still wants to feel, to connect, to enjoy, and to share, even if you don't yet have a partner or haven't felt desire in a long time. And this is where tools like breath work, meditation, sensual movement, massage, or even guided intimacy coaching can be transformative, not because they provide a quick fix, but because they reconnect the brain and body to the sensations and emotions that sustain desire and allow for spontaneous arousal to reemerge. And for some men, the absence of morning erections isn't due to any physical decline, but simply to long-term emotional disconnection, perhaps from a partner who no longer shows affection, or from the self, which has become lost in the fog of routine, expectations, and unspoken grief. And for those men, the return of morning erections often begins not with a pill or a supplement, but with a decision to re-engage emotionally and sensually with their own lives, to start noticing beauty again, to be present in their own skin, to speak kindly to themselves, to forgive what didn't go as planned, and to remember that they still have much to offer, to feel and to give, and sometimes even watching a sunset, preparing a meal with care, or touching your own body with awareness and appreciation can begin to stir the embers of pleasure and reawaken the body's natural rhythms. And the more those embers are fanned with consistency and compassion, the more the body responds, often in surprising and joyful ways. And soon enough, the morning may bring not only a sense of rest and readiness, but the gentle, affirming pressure of a healthy erection once again. Not because you forced it, but because you allowed your whole self to return to balance, to presence, and to the rightful knowing that even at 60, 70, or 80, your body still remembers how to respond when treated with care and listened to with patience. And as we come to the final stretch of this journey, what becomes most clear is that the disappearance of morning erections after 60 is not just a medical curiosity or a matter of vanity. It's a profound indicator, a whisper from the body that all is not lost, but rather shifting, that deeper attention is needed, and that the man who dares to listen, to adapt, and to honor these signals can unlock not only a renewed sense of sexual vitality, but a deeper connection to his entire life. Because the truth that so many don't say aloud is this: growing older does not mean growing irrelevant, and the absence of morningwood doesn't mean the absence of desire, strength, or the right to feel fully alive in your skin. And once you begin to understand that the male body in its 60s, 70s, and beyond operates on rhythms more subtle, but no less powerful than in youth, you begin to see that arousal is no longer about friction and impulse, but about flow, about intention, about the dance between your physical health, emotional openness, mental clarity, and spiritual ease, and when these systems are in alignment. When your sleep is restorative, your testosterone supported, your heart nourished, your mind clear, your stress lowered, your sense of self-worth rekindled, something begins to return, something quiet yet unmistakable, and perhaps at first returns as a dream, a flicker of desire during the night, a stirring you haven't felt in years. And then perhaps one morning, with no warning, you wake up to find your body responding again, as if to say, I'm still here. And in that moment, you realize this part of yourself was never truly gone, just waiting for the conditions to be right, waiting for you to slow down, to listen, to care, to nourish. And the beautiful truth is that these changes do not require perfection or rigid discipline, just consistent love for yourself, the willingness to tweak old habits, and a gentle curiosity toward what your body needs now. Because unlike the past, where youthful hormones drove desire without invitation, this stage of life invites you to co-create arousal, to cultivate it like a garden, to treat your body as a vessel not of loss, but of continued potential. And that shift in perspective is everything. Because when you stop viewing your changing erections as a failure and begin to see them as an evolving form of feedback, you begin to appreciate that this is not the end of your sexual story, but a new chapter, one written with more wisdom, more patience, and more depth than ever before. And the men who embrace this truth, the ones who are willing to try red light therapy on their lower body to improve blood flow, or explore natural nitric oxide boosters like pomegranate juice or dark leafy greens, or who prioritize consistent exercise and stress management, or who allow themselves to feel emotion and talk about their needs without shame. These are the men who begin to notice something magical happening, not only in their bedrooms, but in the way they walk, in the way they breathe, in the way they hold themselves when they look in a mirror, because they no longer see aging as a slow death, but as a new beginning, a different kind of power that doesn't rely on youth's urgency, but on presence, maturity, and grounded confidence. And yes, sometimes the body still has limitations. Sometimes medications or chronic conditions complicate the path. But even then, the decision to show up for yourself, to remain connected, to believe in your worth and your ability to feel pleasure, is one of the most potent medicines of all. Because when you nurture yourself from the inside out, when you eat for circulation, move for strength, sleep for hormone balance, and think for joy, your body often rewards you, not with the reckless impulses of youth, but with a steadier, more soulful return to intimacy. And that includes the subtle, yet deeply affirming experience of waking up with an erection again, a gentle sign from your body that yes, you are alive, you are whole, and you are still capable of experiencing passion, connection, and power in ways that transcend your past. And perhaps that's the ultimate invitation of this season of life, to stop measuring your worth by youthful standards and instead discover a version of masculinity that is deeper, slower, and more emotionally rich. A version of sexuality that is as much about presence and heart as it is about sensation, and in doing so, to not only restore your morning erections, but to awaken your spirit, your confidence, and your quiet pride in the man you become. So if you take nothing else from this conversation, let it be this. Your body is always speaking to you, always offering you clues, and when you stop ignoring those messages, when you begin to respond with care instead of fear, with action instead of avoidance, with curiosity instead of shame, you will be surprised at just how much vitality is still available to you. Because aging is not the absence of youth. It's the presence of experience. And in that experience lies the key to unlocking a level of health, passion, and sexual wellness that isn't behind you, but waiting just ahead, ready to greet you each morning with a quiet reminder. You are not finished yet.